Well, I'd start off, I suppose, by perhaps the most obvious one. Motorcycles are part of the traffic mix, so you've got to have a proper law enforcement regime, because without that, just nothing works at all. So there have to be effective laws in place in all member states of the European Union regarding excessive speed, drinking and riding or driving, alcohol, etc. And they've got to be enforced properly, and there has to be some sort of buy-in to that by the public. And I think it has to be backed up by pretty much relentless publicity campaigns as well. It's not just all about police enforcement, it's a combination of the two things, the publicity and the enforcement. And policymakers need to be intelligent about that. I mean, the number plate's on the back of the motorcycle. If the speed camera is forward facing, it's not going to photograph the number plate. So, you've got then a part of the population that it's very difficult to enforce against, using the means that are used against cars and trucks. So I think we shouldn't lose sight of that obvious point. Another point would be safety helmets. This is not a European Union law, but all 27 member states of the European Union have a helmet law. But as the European Transport Safety Council has regularly pointed out, it's not always enforced. We've got substantial parts of Europe, pockets and areas where people culturally don't seem very bothered. The police don't seem to take much notice. I haven't seen this for a long time, but I have occasionally even seen police officers who are wearing their helmet but no strap on it. So, with that kind of an example, it's not very good. Other sort of specific things for motorcycle safety would be the infrastructure. The streets were designed in the 40s, 50s and 60s for motor cars, because the motor car was king then, and that's what everybody thought about: cars, buses, trucks. And even though to this day in many parts, Barcelona, Rome, etc., lots and lots of people use motorcycles, the roads are not designed for motorcycles. I'm not making a particular complaint here, because they're not designed for pedestrians either, very often. So it's more than just motorcyclists. But a lot can be done, I think, with relatively low cost measures. So you can let the motorcycles into the bus lane. It must be 35 years that I first heard about that, and it was in Sweden, in Stockholm. It was the first city in Europe to allow motorbike riders to go into the bus lanes. Sweden's a safe country, nobody complained about it, but it's taken years and years and years to get policymakers to do that. And very often they don't have a national law. They say, oh, well, this city can decide, and then it's different in another city, and then maybe the rider gets a ticket where perhaps the enforcement isn't quite so deserved. Personal protective equipment, the clothing that we wear, other than the helmets, so the jackets and so on, and footwear. But again, that's got to be specific to the environment. It's sunny here today. You wouldn't want to be wearing, the kind of clothing that I would wear on a motorbike at this time of year in England. So again, it's good to see there's new developments in that area. So there's more clothing coming out that's suitable for different climates. And then training. Riding a motorcycle is not the same as driving a car, and it sounds sort of really obvious to say this, but in my organisation, we've worked with others in the European Union. There is now a basic road safety manual, which is available in most of the European Union languages. We've got lots of manuals in English, so we didn't really need a European one. So our organisation, one of the first things we did was to make a Spanish and a French edition. Then many years pass and the European Union finds some more money, and now we have editions in Portuguese and Italian and most other languages. But maybe we don't publicise that well enough. It's a free download from the internet. I suppose motorcycles and scooters can play a part in this, because an engine is basically a bit like a pump. So if it's a small engine, it's going to produce less pollution than the big engine. Having said that, a lot of the older motos and so on are not particularly good on the pollution levels compared to the modern motor car. So some of the old-fashioned two-stroke technology is not particularly good. But we've seen sort of very rapid strides in that now. And the commitment is to get, even though they produce less, to get motorcycles and scooters down to an environmental performance of the same standard that we expect for cars. But we do also have an advantage in that we don't do so much standing around in traffic. So again, because the motorcycle or scooter gets through the urban environment quicker, that reduces the pollution level as well. And that has been carefully researched by the Paris city authorities. They've looked into that in some detail. Because riders said, well, we think we're good for the environment, but there is some sort of proof on that. And then the other thing, there's been a big research by the University of Louvain in Belgium, and they've done research on one of the worst bits of urban congestion in Belgium, which is from Louvain, where their university is, to the centre of Brussels, which is really dreadful in the mornings. And they've done some calculations, and if only a fairly small percentage of the population moved from the car to a motorcycle, plus other people doing car sharing and other things and so on, but just looking at the shift from 4 wheels to 2, then they get an advantage, but they also produce an advantage for other people who are not able to get on a motorcycle and have to use a car. And quite significant modelling has been done on that. Extrapolated out across the whole of Belgium. That research shows that there'll be significant savings to gross domestic product by a reduction of congestion. So I think the two things, the air quality and the lack of congestion, the two go together. But the motorcycle industry obviously has to play its part, which it is now doing in terms of better emission standards. And going back just very quickly to the safety thing, one thing I did forget to mention is new technology on motorcycles. Because for years we've had anti-lock braking systems on cars and light vans in the European Union. It's only relatively recently it's coming in for motorbikes, and then only above 125cc. And I've always been a strong believer in the effectiveness. It's just a sort of a gut instinct, but we're beginning to see from one French insurer some clear evidence is emerging already that in single vehicle accidents, so no other road user involved, no pedestrian, no other vehicle at all. That's maybe a bit more for the extra urban, but it does apply in the urban area as well. So we shouldn't lose sight of that. This has been the subject of a conference in Brussels a few weeks ago, specifically on motorcycles and new technology. And there's a huge range of new technologies out there, but I'm not seeing as much concern as there should be that new stuff that's coming on cars is also going to come on motorbikes where appropriate or be integrated. So I suppose the biggest challenge is we know that motor cars are now having new equipment put on them to sense other vehicles, to sense pedestrians and so on, to reduce collisions at junctions, etc. This technology must be made in a way that it can also recognise a motorcycle or a scooter or a moped. And my hope is that those big corporations that manufacture both motorcycles and cars, examples like BMW in Europe or Honda worldwide, if they're putting this stuff on their cars, that they make sure it talks to the motorbikes that they produce and everybody else's as well. So there's got to be political intervention here, I think, because there has to be a universal protocol, so all the technology is going to talk to each other. That's got to be a major factor. One of the more sort of sexy ideas is information on the inside of the visor, a bit like a pilot in the Air Force has. We're talking about displays on the inside of the windscreen of cars now. Maybe that's possible with motorcycles as well. But I think we would have to sort of look at it technology by technology. But where would the big wins be? Where would we have a major reduction? I think it would be in collision avoidance technologies, because so much of the problem relates to junction accidents. And it's always the same story. The driver says, well, I didn't see. And so many people say that sometimes they're telling the truth, sometimes they're not. But we do know that humans have a difficulty in perceiving the speed at which a motorcycle is approaching. It's a bit different if that driver also has a motorcycle license. The research shows that the person who has the motorbike license can see and is more aware than the person who doesn't. it's not compulsory to ride a motorbike. I'm not ordering everybody to do it. So if we can get some technology to help those motorists, and maybe the other way around as well, the motorcyclists, I think that would be a really big winner. Then there's eCall, where you've got a direct link to the emergency service if the worst has happened and there has been a collision. And some people have looked into linking that directly through our modern mobile phones rather than technology on the vehicle itself, but sadly at the moment doesn't look as if that's going to work. The connection between the person, the vehicle and the mobile phone is still not sort of secure enough for us to rely on that to work, but maybe in the future, I don't know.